The thunder clapped as Abigail Norton struggled through the mud, her hands cradling her swollen belly while the rain pelted her tear-streaked face. The wagon that had carried her hopes for a new beginning was now just splinters on the mountainside below, along with the broken body of her husband of only 8 months. Wyoming Territory, 1871. The promise of land and opportunity had lured them west from Pennsylvania, a young couple with dreams bigger than their pockets. Thomas had been so excited about their child, due in less than a month. Now he was gone, victim of a washed-out road and spooked horses, while she had somehow been thrown clear of the wagon before it plummeted down the ravine. Abigail's knees buckled, the exhaustion and grief finally overwhelming her as she collapsed into the muddy road. Her simple calico dress, once blue with white flowers, was now stained brown with mud and streaked with blood from scrapes on her hands and knees. The rain continued its merciless assault, washing away her tears as quickly as they fell. "I can't do this," she whispered, one hand pressed to her belly where their child, moved restlessly. "I'm sorry, little one. I don't know how to go on without him." Her wedding band caught what little light filtered through the storm clouds as she dug her fingers into the mud. The simple gold band was all she had left of Thomas, all she had to show for their brief time together. That, and the child who would never know its father. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats over the storm, didn't notice the tall figure on horseback until a shadow fell across her. Abigail looked up, squinting through the rain at the man atop a chestnut stallion. His face was obscured by the wide brim of his hat, but she could make out a strong jaw shadowed with several days' growth of beard. "Madam." His voice was deep, concerned, as he quickly dismounted and approached her. "Are you hurt?" Abigail tried to answer, but a sob caught in her throat instead. The man knelt beside her, his duster becoming instantly soaked in the mud. "My husband," she managed finally. "The wagon. We fell." She gestured weakly toward the ravine. Without hesitation, the stranger stood and walked to the edge, peering down into the darkness. When he returned, his face was grim, confirming what she already knew. There was no hope for Thomas. "I'm so sorry, madam," he said softly. "But you shouldn't be out here. Not in your condition." Abigail tried to stand, determined not to appear completely helpless, but her legs betrayed her. The stranger caught her before she could fall again, strong arms lifting her with surprising gentleness. "I've got you," he said, his voice close to her ear as he carried her toward his horse. "My ranch is about 3 miles from here. We'll get you warm and dry." As he settled her on his horse, climbing up behind her and wrapping a protective arm around her, Abigail felt the baby kick hard, as if acknowledging this unexpected salvation. "I'm Preston," the stranger said as he urged his horse forward through the storm. "Preston Nash." "Abigail Norton," she replied, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Thank you for stopping." His arm tightened slightly around her. "No one should be left alone out here, especially not a lady in your condition. And you won't be kneeling in the mud again, Mrs. Norton. Not while I'm around." The journey to Preston's ranch seemed both eternal and immediate to Abigail's exhausted mind. She drifted in and out of awareness, leaning back against his solid chest, his steady heartbeat a comforting counterpoint to the storm's chaos. The baby moved occasionally, reminding her that no matter what happened, she couldn't give up. When they finally arrived, the rain had slackened to a drizzle. A modest but well-kept ranch house stood before them, lanterns glowing warmly in the windows. A barn and several outbuildings completed the homestead, along with corrals holding a few horses who looked up curiously at their arrival. "Martha," Preston called as he dismounted, then carefully helped Abigail down. "We need help out here." The front door swung open, and an older woman with silver-streaked dark hair hurried out, gasping when she saw Abigail's condition. "Lord above, Preston, who is this poor creature?" "Found her on the North Road. Wagon accident. Her husband didn't make it," Preston explained quickly as he supported Abigail toward the house. "She needs dry clothes and something warm to drink. And probably a doctor." Martha's weathered face softened with compassion. "Come in, dearie. We'll take care of you." The next hours passed in a blur for Abigail. Martha, who Preston explained was his housekeeper and had helped raise him after his mother died, bustled about efficiently. She helped Abigail into dry clothes that had belonged to Preston's late mother, settled her into a clean bed in a small but comfortable guest room, and brought her hot soup and tea. Preston disappeared to tend to his horse and send one of his ranch hands for the doctor from the nearby town of Willow Creek. When he returned, his clothes changed and his face freshly washed, he looked younger than Abigail had initially thought, perhaps 30 to her 23 years. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Norton?" he asked, standing awkwardly in the doorway of the guest room. "Better, thank you," she replied, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. "And please, call me Abigail." He nodded, a slight smile softening his serious expression. "Abigail, then. Dr. Thompson should be here by morning, weather permitting. Meanwhile, you should rest." "Mr. Nash, Preston." "Preston," she amended. "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't come along when you did." He shook his head. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." But Abigail knew better. In her short time out west, she'd already learned that not everyone had such a strong moral compass. Many would have ridden past, unwilling to burden themselves with a pregnant widow. "Nevertheless, I'm grateful," she said softly. "I don't know what I'll do now, but at least I'm alive to figure it out." Preston looked as if he wanted to say more, but instead simply nodded. "We can talk about that tomorrow. For now, just rest." After he left, Abigail lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the rain on the roof and feeling the occasional movements of her baby. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to truly weep for Thomas, for the future they'd planned that would never come to pass, and for the child who would be born fatherless. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, the storm having scrubbed the air clean. Abigail woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she was disoriented, expecting to see the canvas top of their wagon. Then reality crashed back, bringing with it a fresh wave of grief. A soft knock at the door preceded Martha's entrance, carrying a tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Norton. Thought you might be hungry." Abigail sat up, wincing at the soreness in her body. "Thank you, Martha. And please, call me Abigail." The older woman set the tray across Abigail's lap. "How are you feeling this morning, Abigail? Any pains that worry you?" "Just sore from falling. The baby's been moving, so I think we're both all right." Martha nodded approvingly. "Good. Dr. Thompson arrived about an hour ago. He'll see you after you've eaten." As she ate the simple but delicious breakfast, Abigail tried to organize her thoughts. She had no family to turn to. Her parents had died years ago, and she had no siblings. Thomas had been her entire world. Now, with no money and a baby due soon, her options were terrifyingly limited. Dr. Thompson proved to be a kind, grandfatherly man with spectacles and a gentle manner. After examining her, he pronounced both Abigail and her unborn child to be remarkably well, considering what they'd been through. "Bed rest for a few days," he advised. "Then light activity until the baby comes, which I expect will be in about 3 weeks, give or take." "Thank you, Doctor," Abigail said, trying to hide her anxiety about what would happen in those 3 weeks. After the doctor left, Preston appeared at her door, hat in hand. "Abigail, if you're feeling up to it, I'd like to discuss something with you." She nodded, and he pulled a chair up beside the bed, sitting down with an air of purpose. "I sent some men to recover your husband's body," he began gently. "They'll bring him back here, and we can have a proper burial on the hill behind the house, if that's acceptable to you." Tears welled in her eyes at this unexpected kindness. "That would be. Thank you." Preston cleared his throat. "As for your situation, I want you to know that you're welcome to stay here until after the baby is born. Martha's delivered plenty of babies in her time, and the doctor's not far. Once you're recovered, we can figure out next steps." Abigail stared at him, overwhelmed by his generosity. "I couldn't impose like that. You've already done so much." "It's no imposition," he insisted. "The room's just sitting empty otherwise, and Martha would love the company." He hesitated. "Unless you have family somewhere that you'd rather go to?" She shook her head. "No, there's no one." The admission hurt to voice aloud. Preston nodded, as if he'd expected this answer. Then it settled. "You'll stay here until after the baby comes." "I can work," she offered quickly. "Once I'm able. I can cook or clean, or there'll be time to figure all that out." He interrupted gently. "For now, Just focus on taking care of yourself and your child." 3 days later, they buried Thomas on the small hillside behind the ranch house. Preston had his men construct a simple but dignified wooden coffin, and the ranch hands, along with a few neighbors who'd heard about the tragedy, gathered for the brief service. The local preacher came to say words over the grave, and Preston stood beside Abigail, a silent pillar of strength as she said goodbye to her husband. Afterward, when everyone else had gone, Abigail remained by the fresh grave. Preston stayed a respectful distance away, allowing her privacy while ensuring she wasn't alone. "He was so excited about the baby," she said finally, her voice carrying on the clear air. "Said he was going to teach our child everything about farming, whether it was a boy or girl." Preston moved closer, standing beside her at the grave. "He sounds like he was a good man. He was kind and hardworking. We didn't have much, but we had dreams." She looked down at the simple wooden cross bearing Thomas's name. "Now I don't even know what to dream anymore." "Sometimes," Preston said quietly, "life gives us new dreams when the old ones are taken away." Abigail looked up at him then, really studying him for the first time. His face was tanned and weathered from years under the western sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled more than his serious demeanor indicated. His eyes were a clear gray blue, reminding her of the sky after a storm. "You sound like you speak from experience," she observed. A shadow passed over his face. "I came out here with my parents when I was just 12. Had a brother, too, younger by 4 years. Cholera took both my ma and brother our first year here. Pa built this place from nothing, determined to make it work despite everything. Then a few years back, rustlers shot him when he caught them trying to steal our horses." "I'm so sorry," Abigail said softly. Preston shrugged, though the casualness of the gesture was belied by the pain in his eyes. "Point is, I understand what it's like to have your plans torn away. But new dreams can grow, given time." As they walked back to the house together, Abigail felt a curious lightness despite her grief. For the first time since the accident, she felt a flicker of hope that perhaps there could be a future beyond this tragedy. The days settled into an unexpected rhythm. Despite Dr. Thompson's orders for bed rest, Abigail couldn't stand being idle. She began helping Martha with simple tasks, folding laundry, shelling peas on the porch, keeping the housekeeper company while she cooked. Martha, initially protective of the young widow, soon came to appreciate the help and companionship. "Never had a daughter," the older woman confided one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough side by side. "Always wanted one, but it wasn't in God's plan for me. My husband died young, and I came to work for Preston's family when he was just a boy." "You've been here all this time?" Abigail asked. Martha nodded, her hands never stopping their rhythmic work with the dough. "Watched that boy grow into a man. Stubborn as his father, but with his mother's heart. Too solitary for his own good, though. This ranch keeps him busy, but a man needs more than work to sustain him." Abigail didn't miss the speculative glance Martha sent her way, but she pretended not to notice. Her heart was still raw with grief, and the idea of any man besides Thomas seemed impossible. Yet she couldn't deny that Preston Nash was becoming a steady presence in her life. Each evening, he would join her on the porch after dinner, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence as the sun set over the rolling Wyoming landscape. He told her about his cattle operation, about his hopes to expand the ranch, about the challenges and joys of life in the territory. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, of meeting Thomas at a church social, of their dreams of land in the West. Sometimes she cried, and Preston would simply offer his handkerchief without comment. Other times they laughed together, and Abigail would feel a stab of guilt at finding joy so soon after losing her husband. "Thomas would want you to laugh," Preston said one evening, seemingly reading her thoughts. "From what you've told me of him, he wouldn't want you drowning in sorrow." "No," she admitted. "He wouldn't. He always said my laugh was what made him fall in love with me." Preston looked at her then, something unreadable in his expression. "He had good taste," he said simply, then turned his gaze back to the sunset. 2 weeks after arriving at the Nash Ranch, Abigail woke in the night to a sharp pain across her abdomen. She sat up, gasping, hands going to her belly. Another pain followed, and she knew immediately what was happening. The baby was coming, earlier than expected. "Martha," she called, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. "Martha, please." The housekeeper appeared within minutes, taking in the situation with experienced eyes. "I'll get Preston to fetch the doctor. You just breathe, child. This isn't my first birthing." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Dr. Thompson arrived just as dawn was breaking, but by then things were progressing rapidly. Preston paced outside the door, having been banished by Martha, but unwilling to go far. When the cries of a newborn finally pierced the morning air, Preston stopped his pacing, staring at the closed door as if he could see through it. Inside, Abigail wept as she held her daughter for the first time, a tiny, red-faced miracle with a shock of dark hair like her father's. "She's perfect," Dr. Thompson assured her. "Small but strong. Would you like to name her after her father?" Martha asked gently, smoothing Abigail's sweat-dampened hair back from her forehead. Abigail shook her head. "No, her middle name will be Thomasina, for him, but I want to give her a name that's her own." She looked down at the now quiet infant. "I think I'll call her Hope. Hope Thomasina Norton." Martha's eyes filled with tears. A beautiful name for a beautiful girl. Later, after Abigail had rested and both she and the baby had been cleaned up, Martha opened the door to find Preston still waiting outside. "Would you like to meet the newest resident of your ranch?" she asked with a smile. Preston entered the room hesitantly, his usual confidence absent as he approached the bed where Abigail sat propped against pillows, the tiny bundle in her arms. "Preston, this is Hope," Abigail said softly, turning the baby slightly so he could see her face. He stared down at the infant with an expression of wonder. "She's so small," he marveled. "Would you like to hold her?" His eyes widened. "I don't know if I should. My hands are too rough for something so delicate." "Nonsense," Abigail said. "Just support her head. Here." Before he could protest further, she transferred the baby to his arms. Preston held the tiny infant as if she were made of spun glass, his large hands incongruously gentle. "Hello, Miss Hope," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." Something shifted in Abigail's heart as she watched this strong, capable man holding her daughter with such tenderness. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the awakening of possibility, like the first green shoot pushing through soil after a long winter. The weeks following Hope's birth brought new challenges and joys. Abigail recovered her strength quickly, determined to pull her weight around the ranch. She insisted on taking over more of the cooking and household tasks, freeing Martha to spend time with baby Hope, who had thoroughly captured the older woman's heart. Preston, meanwhile, found increasingly flimsy excuses to come back to the house during the day, checking if they needed supplies from town, asking Martha about dinner plans, wondering if the roof was leaking in the spare room. Each time, he would spend a few minutes with Hope, marveling at how she seemed to change daily. "She's got your eyes," he told Abigail one afternoon as they sat on the porch, Hope sleeping in a makeshift cradle beside them. "Do you think so?" Abigail looked down at her daughter. "I was hoping she'd have more of Thomas in her." Preston was quiet for a moment. "It's natural you'd want that. But she'll know about her father. You'll make sure of that." "Sometimes I worry I'll forget him," Abigail confessed, voicing a fear that had been growing since Hope's birth. "That his face will fade from my memory. And then what will I tell her?" "You won't forget," Preston assured her. "And she'll know him through your stories, through the love you carry for him." Abigail studied Preston's face, struck by his understanding. "Thank you for that. And for everything you've done for us." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Having you and Hope here, it's brought something to this place that was missing." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Abigail looked away first, not ready to confront what was growing between them. One evening in late summer, about 2 months after Hope's birth, Preston returned from a trip to town with an unusually serious expression. He found Abigail in the kitchen, kneading dough for tomorrow's bread, while Martha entertained Hope. "Could I speak with you privately?" he asked, his voice tight with what sounded like controlled anger. Alarmed, Abigail wiped her hands on her apron and followed him onto the porch. "What's wrong?" Preston paced for a moment before stopping abruptly. "I ran into Jebediah Wilkes in town. He's the land agent for this territory." "Yes." Abigail prompted when he paused. He mentioned that a young widow had been asking about claiming the land that was meant for her and her late husband. Preston's eyes fixed on her face. "You've been going into town without telling me." Abigail straightened her spine. I didn't realize I needed your permission to go into town, Mr. Nash. His expression softened slightly at her formal address. That's not what I meant, and you know it. I'm concerned about you traveling alone with Hope. Martha watched Hope, and I needed to understand my options. She hesitated. We can't stay here forever, Preston. You've been incredibly generous, but Hope and I need our own place eventually. Is it so terrible here? He asked, genuine hurt in his voice. No, of course not. It's been wonderful, but I can't keep living on your charity. Preston ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. It's not charity, Abigail. It's... He trailed off, seemingly unable to find the right words. It's what? She pressed. He took a step toward her. Do you really not know how I feel about you? About Hope? Abigail's heart began to race. Preston, I know it's too soon, he interrupted. I know you're still grieving Thomas, and I respect that. But I can't stand the thought of you leaving, of building some solitary life elsewhere when you could have a home here. What exactly are you saying? Abigail asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Preston took a deep breath. I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Abigail Norton. And with that little girl of yours. I'm saying that I want you both to stay, not as guests or charity cases, but as my family. Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. Preston, I don't know if I'm ready. I'm not asking for an answer right now, he said quickly. I know you need time. I just couldn't let you make plans to leave without telling you how I feel. He reached out tentatively, taking her hand in his. All I'm asking is that you consider a future here, with me. Abigail looked down at their joined hands, his large and work-roughened, hers smaller, but no less marked by labor. I can't make any promises right now. I understand, he said, though disappointment shadowed his face. Just promise you won't make any decisions about leaving without talking to me first. She nodded, unable to deny him that much. I promise. That night, Abigail lay awake long after Hope had fallen asleep in the cradle beside her bed. Preston's words echoed in her mind, stirring feelings she'd been trying to ignore. Was it possible to love again so soon? Would loving Preston somehow diminish what she'd had with Thomas? She thought of how Preston had found her that stormy night, lifting her from the mud with such gentleness. How he'd made room in his home and his life for her and Hope without hesitation. How his face lit up when Hope gripped his finger with her tiny hand. Perhaps, she thought, new love didn't erase the old. Perhaps the heart simply expanded to hold more. 3 days passed with a new awareness between them. Preston didn't press the issue, but Abigail caught him watching her sometimes with a yearning that matched her own growing feelings. She found herself noticing things she'd overlooked before, the way the corner of his mouth lifted slightly before he smiled fully, how he hummed tunelessly while doing chores, the gentleness of his hands when he held Hope. On the 4th day, trouble arrived in the form of 3 rough-looking men who rode onto the ranch around midday. Abigail was hanging laundry when they approached, and something in their manner immediately set her on edge. Madam, the leader called, tipping his hat with mock politeness. We're looking for Preston Nash. He's out with the cattle, she replied cautiously. Can I help you with something? The man dismounted, coming closer than was proper. Perhaps you can. You his wife. No, Abigail said, taking a step back. I'm staying here temporarily. The man smirked, looking back at his companions. Hear that, boys? She's staying here temporarily. With a baby, if the diapers on that line mean anything. He turned back to Abigail, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Nash always did have an eye for the ladies. Martha appeared on the porch, Hope in her arms. Abigail? Everything all right? Just fine, Martha, Abigail called, trying to keep her voice steady. These men are looking for Preston. The leader's eyes narrowed at the sight of Martha. Well, if it isn't old Martha Wilson. Still playing mother hen to Nash, I see. Martha's face hardened. Lyle Decker, I thought you were still in prison where you belong. Got out early for good behavior. Decker replied with a grin that suggested good behavior was not in his repertoire. Thought I'd pay a visit to my old friend Preston. We have some unfinished business. He'll be back by supper, Martha said. You can leave a message. Decker shook his head. I think we'll wait. Been riding a long way. He signaled to his men, who dismounted and began making themselves comfortable, tying their horses to the fence and settling on the ground nearby. Abigail glanced at Martha, who gave a small, worried headshake. Gathering the remaining laundry, Abigail hurried to the porch, where Martha pulled her inside and locked the door behind them. "Who are they?" Abigail asked in a whisper, peering through the curtains at the men lounging in the yard. "Lyle Decker used to ride with the gang that killed Preston's father," Martha explained, bouncing Hope gently when she began to fuss. "Preston testified against him at the trial 5 years ago. Got Decker sent to prison while the rest of his gang either died in the gunfight or escaped." Abigail's blood ran cold. "And now he's back for revenge." Martha nodded grimly. "We need to warn Preston before he rides in unaware." "How?" "They're watching the house." Martha considered for a moment. "The back window in the kitchen opens onto the garden. If you stay low, you might make it to the trees without being seen. From there, you could circle around to the north pasture where Preston's working today." Abigail looked at Hope, now sleeping peacefully in Martha's arms. "I can't leave you both here with those men. They won't harm us," Martha said with more confidence than she probably felt. "Decker wants Preston, not us. Besides, I've got a shotgun under the kitchen counter." After a brief debate, they agreed it was the only plan that made sense. Abigail changed into her sturdiest boots and darkest dress to be less visible, then slipped out the kitchen window while Martha kept watch. Heart pounding, she stayed low among the vegetable plants until she reached the tree line beyond the garden. Once under the cover of the trees, she picked up her pace, moving as quickly as she could toward the north pasture. The journey took nearly an hour, the terrain more difficult than she'd anticipated. When she finally spotted Preston and 2 of his ranch hands working with the cattle, relief flooded through her. "Preston," she called, hurrying toward him. He looked up, surprise and then alarm crossing his face as he saw her running toward him. Immediately, he spurred his horse in her direction. "Abigail, what's wrong? Is it Hope?" "Hope's fine," she gasped, catching her breath. "But there are men at the ranch. Lyle Decker and 2 others. Martha says he used to ride with the gang that killed your father." Preston's face hardened. "Decker's supposed to be in prison. Martha said he got out early. He's waiting for you. Preston says you have unfinished business." Without hesitation, Preston turned to his ranch hands. "Joe, Tom, ride to town and get the sheriff. Tell him Decker's back." He looked back at Abigail. "How long have they been at the ranch?" "About an hour. Martha has a shotgun, but I'm worried about her and Hope." Preston helped her onto his horse, swinging up behind her. "We'll go back together. There's a rifle in my saddle holster if things get ugly." The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever, though in reality, it was probably only 30 minutes. As they approached, Preston slowed his horse, circling around to approach from behind the barn rather than the main road. "Stay here," he instructed as they dismounted. "If you hear shooting, take my horse and ride for town." "I'm coming with you," Abigail insisted. "Martha and Hope are in there." Preston looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face must have convinced him of the futility. "Stay behind me, then." They moved cautiously toward the house. The 3 men's horses were still tied to the fence, but the yard was empty. "They must be inside," Preston whispered. Decker never was one for patience. As they reached the back door, they heard Martha's raised voice from within. "You have no right to be in this house. Get out before I fill you with buckshot." Preston motioned for Abigail to stay back, then kicked the door open, his rifle raised. "Decker, step away from her." Inside, they found a tense standoff. Martha stood in the kitchen doorway, shotgun pointed at Decker, who had his hand on his holstered pistol. His 2 companions flanked him, their hands also hovering near their weapons. Hope's cries could be heard from somewhere deeper in the house. "Nash," Decker drawled, his eyes never leaving Martha. "About time you showed up. Your housekeeper isn't very hospitable. Get out of my house, Decker," Preston said, his voice deadly calm. "Whatever business you think we have can be handled outside." Decker finally turned to face Preston, a cold smile spreading across his face. "You cost me 5 years of my life, Nash. 5 years in a cage because you couldn't mind your own business. You and your friends killed my father," Preston replied. "I'd say that made it my business. Your father should have handed over his horses and lived. Instead, he got brave." Decker's smile turned ugly. "Just like you're being brave now. Difference is, I'm not alone this time." The tension in the room was palpable. Abigail edged toward the hallway, desperate to reach Hope, whose cries had intensified. This can go one of two ways, Preston said. You leave now, never come back, and we all live to see tomorrow. Or you try to settle your score, and most of us don't make it out of this room alive. His eyes flicked briefly to Abigail. There's a woman and baby here, Decker. Is your revenge worth their lives too? Something shifted in Decker's expression, not quite remorse, but perhaps a calculation of odds. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses came from outside. That'll be the sheriff, Preston said, though he couldn't possibly know if his ranch hands had reached town yet. Last chance to leave without more prison time, Decker. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. Then Decker lowered his hand from his holster, signaling his men to do the same. This isn't over, Nash, he spat. But I'm not going back to prison today. As the three men filed out of the house, Preston kept his rifle trained on them, following them onto the porch to ensure they mounted up and rode away. Only when they were dots on the horizon did he lower his weapon. Abigail had already rushed to the bedroom, where she found Hope red-faced and wailing in her cradle. She scooped up her daughter, murmuring soothing words as she held her close. Preston appeared in the doorway, his face etched with concern. Are you both all right? We're fine, Abigail assured him, though her hands trembled slightly as she cradled Hope. Just scared. He crossed the room in 2 strides, enfolding both of them in his arms. I'm sorry you had to go through that. If anything had happened to either of you. Abigail leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. You got here in time. That's what matters. Later that evening, after the sheriff had come and gone with promises to keep an eye out for Decker and his men, Abigail found Preston on the porch, staring into the darkness. Hope's finally asleep, she said, sitting beside him on the porch swing. Martha too, I think. It's been quite a day. Preston nodded, still looking troubled. Decker won't give up so easily. He'll be back. The sheriff said they'd patrol more regularly. Sheriffs can't be everywhere. Preston turned to face her. Abigail, maybe you should consider taking Hope somewhere safer. At least until this blows over. She studied his face in the soft lamplight spilling from the window. Is that what you want? For us to leave? God, no, he said vehemently. It's the last thing I want. But I couldn't bear it if something happened to you or Hope because of my past. Abigail reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. Preston, when you found me that night on the road, I was at the lowest point of my life. I'd lost everything: my husband, our future, our dreams. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe or happy again. His hand tightened around hers. Abigail, let me finish, she said gently. These past few months, watching you with Hope, seeing how you've opened your home and your heart to us, I've realized something. The heart doesn't have a limited capacity for love. Loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for Thomas. It honors it, because he would want me and Hope to be happy. Preston's eyes widened. Are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Preston Nash. I'm saying Hope and I aren't going anywhere, no matter what dangers come. This is our home now. You are our home. The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, a promise rather than a demand, and Abigail found herself melting into it, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek. When they finally parted, Preston rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since the first time I saw you smile. Abigail laughed softly, even with me in a mud-covered dress and crying my eyes out. Even then, he assured her, you were the strongest woman I'd ever met. On your knees, but not broken. She sobered at the memory. You told me I'd never kneel in the mud again. And I meant it. Preston's eyes held hers, sincere and unwavering. Abigail, I can't replace what you lost. I wouldn't try to. But I promise to love you and Hope for the rest of my days, if you'll have me. Is that a proposal, Mr. Nash? She asked, her heart so full she thought it might burst. It is indeed, Mrs. Norton. He slid from the swing to one knee before her. Abigail, will you marry me? Will you let me be a father to Hope and any other children we might be blessed with? Tears of happiness spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, yes to all of it. Spring came to Wyoming, bringing with it new life and new beginnings. The ranch bloomed under the combined efforts of Preston and Abigail, who had married in a simple ceremony just before Christmas. Hope, now nearly a year old, was taking her first wobbly steps, pursuing the ranch cats with determined concentration. On a warm afternoon, Abigail stood on the porch, watching Preston teaching Hope to pet a gentle old mare. Her hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, where their second child, Preston's first by blood but second by love, was growing. Martha joined her, following her gaze to where Preston was lifting Hope onto the mare's back, his hands steady and protective. "He's a natural father," the older woman observed. "Always knew he would be, once he found the right woman to build a family with." Abigail smiled, thinking of how far they'd all come. Lyle Decker had been caught trying to rob a bank in Cheyenne and was back in prison. The ranch was thriving, expanded now with the addition of the land that would have been hers and Thomas's, which Preston had purchased legally once they were married. Most importantly, the grief that had once threatened to consume her had transformed into something else not forgotten, but woven into the fabric of her life alongside new joy, new love, new hope. "Did I ever tell you what he said to me that first night?" Abigail asked Martha. "When he found me in the mud after the wagon accident." Martha shook her head. "He told me I'd never kneel in the mud again." Abigail's hand caressed her growing belly. "And I haven't. Not once." In the pasture, Preston looked up, catching her eye. The love in his gaze was clear even from a distance, and Abigail raised her hand in a small wave, her heart full to overflowing. She had lost one dream in the mud of that stormy road, but found another different, unexpected, but no less beautiful for being unplanned. And as Hope's delighted laughter floated across the ranch, Abigail knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where they all belonged.